Rain presses down on Seattle like a confession no one wants to make. In a dim apartment above a noisy street, a single mother counts dollars on a cracked kitchen table, knowing they won't be enough. Two 5-year-old boys wait for a miracle that never seems to come. Across the city, a lonely man with too much money and a broken past walks into a small restaurant, expecting nothing, finding everything. One dinner, one choice. One moment that will quietly rewrite 4 lives. No flashing signs, no grand rescue, just presence. And a second chance no one saw coming. What happens next will remind you that God's miracles don't shout, they stay. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from. Drop your country in the comments below. And if you believe no one should have to face life alone, subscribe now and share this story with someone who needs hope. Seattle in December was a city that refused to slow down for anyone. Rain fell not in dramatic storms, but in a constant, exhausting drizzle that soaked into clothes, shoes, and spirits alike. The sky hovered low and gray, as if pressing down on the streets, and the air smelled of wet pavement, salt from the nearby water, and the faint bitterness of coffee drifting from cafes that never quite felt warm enough. People walked fast here, heads down, shoulders hunched, not just against the cold, but against life itself. Seattle didn't pause. It didn't ask how you were doing. It simply kept moving. Sarah Whitmore moved with it, whether she wanted to or not. She stepped off the bus at the corner of Aurora Avenue just after 6 in the evening, her breath visible as she exhaled. The bus pulled away with a hiss, splashing dirty water onto the curb, and Sarah tightened her grip on the straps of her worn canvas bag. She was 34, slim but not fragile, her body shaped by years of standing on her feet and carrying more than she should have. Laundry baskets, grocery bags, responsibilities. Her dark auburn hair was pulled into a low ponytail that had begun to fray, strands escaping to curl around her face. Rain clung to her coat, darkening the fabric at the shoulders. Her face bore the quiet marks of exhaustion, faint lines at the corners of her eyes, lips often pressed together in thought. But there was a steadiness in her gaze that suggested she hadn't given up, even when she had every reason to. She crossed the street carefully, checking both directions twice, not out of fear, but habit. When you had children, recklessness stopped feeling romantic. Their apartment building stood a half-block away, an aging concrete structure with flickering hallway lights and a door that never shut quite right. Sarah climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, her knees protesting softly. Inside, the apartment was small but tidy, warmed by a space heater humming in the corner, and the sound of 2 familiar voices arguing over something deeply important. "Noah, you're doing it wrong." "I'm not doing it wrong. It's supposed to lean." "It's not supposed to lean." Sarah pushed the door open and smiled despite herself. Noah and Eli sat on the living room floor, surrounded by scattered crayons, a stack of old magazines, and a half-built structure made of cardboard boxes. They were twins, 6 years old, identical in face but entirely different in spirit. Noah, sitting cross-legged and serious, had sandy brown hair that always fell into his eyes and a thoughtful expression that made him seem older than he was. He noticed things, tone of voice, silences, the way adults avoided certain words. He felt before he spoke. Eli, on the other hand, knelt on one knee, animated and restless, his hair a mess of lighter curls, his grin quick and unapologetic. He laughed easily and often, using humor like a shield against anything uncomfortable. If Noah absorbed the world quietly, Eli charged at it head first. Sarah set her bag down and slipped off her shoes. "Hey," she said softly. Both boys looked up. "Mom!" Eli scrambled to his feet and ran toward her, nearly tripping over a box. Noah followed more slowly, but wrapped his arms around her waist just as tightly. Sarah knelt, hugging them both, breathing them in, the clean soap smell of their clothes, the faint scent of crayons and paper. For a moment, the city outside ceased to exist. "How was school?" she asked, standing again. "Okay," Noah said. "We learned about clouds." "And I learned that Tommy Miller eats glue," Eli added proudly. Sarah laughed once, brief but genuine. "That's educational." She moved into the small kitchen, where the window rattled softly from the wind. Dinner was already started, soup warming on the stove, bread thawing on the counter. She moved with efficiency, born of repetition, stirring, tasting, adjusting. Money was tight, but routines were solid, and that counted for something. As they ate, The rain intensified, tapping against the glass like impatient fingers. The boys talked over each other, voices rising with excitement, until Noah suddenly paused. "Mom," he said carefully, "you know tomorrow is our birthday." Sarah's spoon froze for half a second before she recovered. "I know," she said, keeping her tone light. 6 years old? That's big." Eli leaned forward. "Are we still doing something special?" Sarah met their eyes, one at a time. She had planned for this, or rather, she had planned to plan. The truth was simpler and harder. She had $27 left until her next paycheck. $27 to cover food, electricity, and whatever surprises the city decided to throw at them. "Yes," she said finally, "we are." Noah studied her face, searching for cracks. "What kind of special?" Sarah hesitated, then decided. "Dinner, somewhere nice." Eli's eyes widened. "Like, nice? Sarah smiled. "Nice enough." The next afternoon, the rain followed them downtown, misting their jackets and soaking into their shoes as they walked. Seattle's holiday lights were already up, glowing softly through the gray. Strings of white bulbs wrapped around bare trees, shop windows dressed in silver and gold. The boys stayed close to Sarah, their hands tucked into her coat pockets. They stopped in front of a restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a warm interior, polished wood, candlelit tables, people laughing quietly over plates of food that looked like art. The reflection of the lights shimmered on the water outside, blurring city and sea. Eli pressed his face to the glass. "Whoa." Noah said nothing, but his eyes were wide, taking everything in. Sarah swallowed. She hadn't planned to stop here, not really, but her feet had carried her anyway. Inside, the warmth hit them immediately, along with the smell of bread and herbs. A host greeted them politely, though his eyes flicked to Sarah's damp coat, her sensible shoes. He handed her menus and led them to a small table near the window. Sarah sat down slowly, heart pounding. She opened the menu and felt the ground shift beneath her. She flipped the page. Appetizers started at $18. Main courses climbed quickly from there. She did the math again, though she already knew the answer. Noah leaned over. "What are you getting, Mom?" Sarah's throat tightened. "I'm just looking." Eli bounced in his seat. "I want the chicken with fries." Sarah glanced at the price and felt heat rise behind her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "That one's a little too much." The boys exchanged a look. Eli's smile faded, but only slightly. "It's okay," he said too quickly. Noah nodded. "We can share something." Sarah closed her eyes for a brief second, then opened them. She straightened her back. "We'll figure it out." From 2 tables away, a man watched them. Daniel Crow sat alone, his posture rigid, his dark coat draped over the back of his chair. At 58, his face was defined by sharp angles and a neatly trimmed salt and pepper beard. His hair was thinning slightly at the temples, but his eyes, steel gray and observant, missed little. He was accustomed to commanding rooms, to being listened to. Tonight, he said nothing. He noticed the way Sarah's hands trembled just slightly as she held the menu, the way the boys tried to make themselves smaller, quieter. He recognized it because he had seen it before, in boardrooms, in hospital waiting rooms, in the mirror during years he preferred not to remember. Loneliness, he thought, wore many disguises. As Sarah closed the menu and drew a steadying breath, Daniel set his napkin down and stood. Daniel Crow did not move quickly. He stood from his chair with the careful restraint of a man who had learned that sudden gestures made people nervous. His movements were deliberate, almost cautious, as though he were approaching something fragile. A waiter stepped aside instinctively when Daniel passed, recognizing him without knowing why. There was something about the man, his posture, the absence of hurry, that suggested authority without display. Sarah noticed him only when his shadow crossed the edge of their table. She looked up, startled, her first instinct defensive. Years of living carefully had trained her to expect bad news before good intentions. The man standing beside them was tall, taller than she had first realized, with broad shoulders beneath a dark wool coat. His face was angular, carved by time rather than softened by it, and his beard was trimmed close, salt and pepper catching the warm light of the restaurant. His eyes, gray and steady, were fixed not on Sarah, but on the boys. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said. His voice was calm, low, practiced, but not cold. There was no smile yet, only seriousness. Sarah straightened in her chair. "We're fine," she said quickly, too quickly. Daniel nodded once, acknowledging the reflex. I'm sure you are. He glanced at the empty space on the table, the unopened menu folded neatly in front of Sarah. I couldn't help noticing you were just about to leave. Eli leaned closer to his mother, his earlier excitement replaced by curiosity. Noah watched Daniel with a stillness that made him seem older than 6. We haven't decided yet, Sarah replied. Daniel studied her face then, truly looked. He saw the tension around her mouth, the way her hands were clasped together too tightly in her lap. He recognized the posture, not weakness, but containment, the kind of pride that refused to spill. My name is Daniel, he said. Daniel Crow. Sarah did not offer her name, not yet. I'm dining alone tonight, Daniel continued, his tone even, and I wondered if you and your boys might consider joining me. The words landed gently, but their meaning was heavy. No, Sarah said immediately. Thank you, but no. Daniel did not look offended. If anything, he looked unsurprised. I understand. Eli blinked. Mom? Sarah placed a hand on his arm. It's okay. Daniel took a step back, giving her space. I'm not offering charity, he said. I'm offering company. That made her hesitate. Sarah had refused help before, from friends who asked too many questions, from coworkers who offered sympathy disguised as advice. But this was different. This man was not reaching into his wallet. He was standing there, waiting. I don't know you, she said carefully. Daniel inclined his head. That's fair. Noah tilted his head, studying Daniel with unsettling seriousness. Are you lonely? He asked. The question cut, cleanly through the air. Sarah's breath caught. Noah, it's all right, Daniel said, interrupting gently. He crouched slightly, bringing himself closer to the boy's eye level without looming. His knees creaked faintly as he did. That's a good question. He looked at Noah directly. Yes, he answered. I am. Silence followed. It was the kind of silence that demanded honesty, and Daniel had given it. Sarah felt something shift inside her, uncomfortable and unfamiliar. Loneliness she understood, loneliness she could respect. You don't owe me anything, Daniel said, rising again. If you say no, that's the end of it. I won't ask again. Sarah looked at her sons. Eli's face was open, hopeful but cautious. Noah's eyes searched hers, not pleading, waiting. She exhaled slowly. All right, she said, but just dinner. Daniel nodded. Of course. They moved to his table, larger and closer to the windows. The water outside glimmered under the city lights, ferries moving silently in the distance. Daniel pulled out chairs for the boys, then for Sarah, with an old-fashioned courtesy that made her uncomfortable in a way she couldn't quite explain. Menus were opened again. Sarah's hands trembled slightly, but she kept them steady. Order whatever you like, Daniel said to the boys. Eli opened his mouth immediately, then froze. He looked at Sarah, then back at Daniel. Really? Really, Daniel said. Noah spoke quietly. Is there a limit? Daniel smiled then, not wide, but genuine. No, Sarah swallowed. They don't need much, she said. Daniel met her gaze. Neither do I. The waiter returned, eyes flicking between them with thinly veiled curiosity. Daniel ordered simply for himself, then let the boys choose. Eli picked the chicken and fries after all, his voice trembling with excitement. Noah chose pasta, carefully, apologetically. And you? Daniel asked Sarah. She hesitated. Old habits pressed hard. Soup, she said finally. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? Yes. He did not argue. As they waited, conversation came slowly, like cautious steps onto thin ice. It's their birthday, Sarah said, surprising herself. Today. Daniel's gaze softened. Happy birthday, he told the boys. Eli beamed. Noah smiled shyly. 6, Eli said proudly. We're big now. Daniel nodded solemnly. A serious age. The food arrived, steaming and fragrant. Eli stared at his plate as if it might disappear. Noah folded his napkin carefully before eating, a habit he'd picked up from watching adults. Sarah lifted her spoon, but didn't taste the soup right away. She was watching Daniel, how he watched them. Not possessively, not intrusively, just attentively, as if this moment mattered. So, Daniel said quietly, do you live nearby? Sarah stiffened. A few blocks. That must be convenient, she nodded. It is. He didn't press. Minutes passed, plates emptied. Eli talked with his mouth full until Noah kicked him gently under the table. Daniel laughed softly, surprised by the sound of it himself. "I used to have a daughter," he said suddenly. Sarah paused. "Used to?" "She's still alive," Daniel clarified. "She just doesn't speak to me." The boys stopped eating. Daniel stared at his hands. 10 years, he continued. "That's how long it's been." Sarah waited. "I made choices," he said. "Bad ones. When her mother was sick, I wasn't present. I thought providing was enough." Noah spoke again, quietly. "Did you say sorry?" Daniel closed his eyes briefly. "Not well enough." The waiter appeared with the check before anyone could speak again. Daniel reached for it automatically. Sarah's hand shot out. "No." Daniel looked at her. "I appreciate the meal," she said, "but I won't leave feeling like I owe you." Daniel considered her, then slid the check back toward himself. "Then don't owe me," he said. "Let it be a gift." Sarah shook her head. "I don't take gifts from strangers." Daniel reached into his coat and pulled out a pen. He wrote something on the back of the receipt and placed it on the table. "Then don't," he said calmly. "But if you ever change your mind about company, that's my number." He stood, pulling on his coat. "Thank you for sharing your dinner with me." Eli frowned. "You're leaving?" Daniel smiled down at him. "Yes." "Will we see you again?" Noah asked. Daniel hesitated. Then, honestly, "I don't know." He nodded to Sarah once more, then walked away. Sarah sat very still, staring at the receipt. Outside, the rain continued to fall. 3 days passed before Sarah saw Daniel Crow again. Seattle remained stubbornly gray, the rain never fully stopping, only changing its mind about how hard it wanted to fall. The city moved as it always did, ferries sliding through mist, buses groaning at corners, people carrying umbrellas like shields. Sarah returned to her routines with practiced focus: work, home, dinner, homework, sleep. She told herself the dinner had been a one-time interruption, a strange pause in an otherwise predictable life. But predictability had a way of cracking. On Thursday afternoon, Sarah was walking the boys home from school when she noticed him standing across the street near a small bakery. Daniel wore a dark jacket again, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed but attentive, as if he were waiting without wanting to be seen waiting. He wasn't looking at the bakery window or his phone, he was watching the sidewalk, watching them. Sarah's first instinct was irritation. Her second was unease. Eli noticed him at the same moment. "Hey," he said, tugging her sleeve. "That's the dinner guy." Noah stopped walking. He studied Daniel, then looked up at Sarah. "Is he following us?" Daniel crossed the street before Sarah could answer. He stopped a few steps away, careful not to crowd them. "Hello," he said. "I hoped I'd run into you." Sarah tightened her grip on the boy's hands. "We're on our way home." "I won't keep you," Daniel replied. "I just wanted to say hello. And thank you again." "For dinner?" Sarah asked. "For letting me sit with you," he said. She didn't respond right away. The rain dripped steadily from the awning above the bakery door. The smell of bread and sugar hung in the air, warm and tempting. Eli rocked on his heels. "Are you lonely again today?" Daniel almost smiled. "Less than I was," he answered honestly. Sarah sighed. "What do you want, Mr. Crow?" Daniel met her gaze. "Conversation." "That's not something you ask strangers for," she said. "True," he admitted, "but I'm trying to be braver about asking." That unsettled her more than if he had offered money. She considered saying no, considered the long walk home, the quiet apartment, the safety of not complicating things. But then Noah spoke. "We can talk while we walk," he suggested. Sarah shot him a look. Noah shrugged, unapologetic. "All right," she said finally, "but just walking." They moved together down the sidewalk. Daniel kept pace easily, his stride long but unhurried. He didn't try to steer them anywhere else. "I don't usually do this," Sarah said after a moment. "Neither do I," Daniel replied. That earned him a sideways glance. "You look like someone who usually gets what he wants." Daniel huffed softly. "That depends on what it is." They reached the boys' apartment building sooner than Sarah expected. She stopped at the door. "This is where we live," she said. "A clear boundary." Daniel nodded. "It's a nice area." "It's affordable," she corrected. He smiled faintly. "Those aren't always the same thing." The boys hovered nearby, reluctant to go inside. "Will you come back?" Eli asked bluntly. Sarah opened her mouth to stop him, but Daniel answered first. "If your mother allows it," he said, looking at Sarah. "I'd like that." She hesitated. The hallway lights flickered behind her. Upstairs, someone argued loudly on a phone. This was her real life. Messy, imperfect, exposed. "Fine," she said, "but no surprises." Daniel nodded. No surprises. The next visit happened on Saturday. Daniel arrived without announcement, empty-handed, just as promised. He stood awkwardly in the doorway of Sarah's apartment, looking slightly out of place amid the small space and mismatched furniture. "It's cozy," he said. Sarah snorted. "That's one word for it." The boys warmed to him quickly. Eli insisted on showing him their cardboard creations. Noah asked him questions about fairies and how computers worked. Daniel listened, really listened. He didn't check his watch, he didn't interrupt. Sarah watched from the kitchen, arms crossed, suspicions simmering beneath politeness. Why was he here? Neighbors noticed too. Mrs. Hargreave from across the hall raised an eyebrow when she passed Daniel in the stairwell. Another tenant smiled knowingly. Someone else whispered. Sarah felt the familiar prickle of judgment crawling up her spine. After the boys disappeared into their room to argue over crayons, Sarah gestured toward the small kitchen table. "Sit," she said. Daniel obeyed. "Let's be clear," she began. "You don't get to show up here because you paid for dinner." "I didn't pay for permission," he said calmly. "You're right," she said. "You didn't, which is why I don't understand." Daniel folded his hands. He looked tired today. Not physically, emotionally, like a man carrying something heavy for too long. "I spent most of my life thinking money solved things," he said. "It didn't. That's not my problem," Sarah replied. "No," he agreed. "It's mine." She waited. "I told you I have a daughter," he continued. "What I didn't say was how badly I failed her." Sarah leaned against the counter, arms still crossed. "You said you weren't present." "That's the gentle version," Daniel said. "The truth is, I ran." Her jaw tightened. "My wife was sick," he went on. "Cancer, long, ugly, unforgiving. Lucy was 12. I couldn't stand watching someone I loved disappear piece by piece, so I worked more, traveled more, stayed away." Sarah's breath caught. She knew that story, knew its shape. "When my wife died," Daniel said quietly, "Lucy needed me, and I wasn't there." "Not really." Silence filled the kitchen. "She stopped speaking to me," he said, "and instead of fighting for her, I accepted it. I told myself it was what she wanted." Sarah pushed away from the counter. "That's a lie," she said flatly. Daniel flinched. "You didn't lose her," Sarah continued. "You abandoned her. Again." Daniel nodded once. "I know." The boys' laughter drifted in from the bedroom, oblivious. "So, why us?" Sarah asked. "Why now?" Daniel looked toward the doorway, then back at her. "Because your sons don't pretend not to feel things. Because you don't hide behind excuses. Because sitting at that table, watching you share something you barely had, it reminded me of everything I ran from." Sarah's throat tightened. She didn't like being seen this clearly. "This isn't redemption," she said. "You don't get to fix your past by inserting yourself into our lives." "I'm not asking to fix anything," Daniel said. "I'm asking to stay long enough to learn how not to run." Sarah studied him for a long moment. "You can visit," she said finally. "But understand this. The moment this becomes about money or control or easing your guilt, you're done." Daniel stood. "That's fair." As he reached the door, Noah appeared, holding a drawing. "For you," Noah said. Daniel accepted it carefully. It was a simple sketch, 4 stick figures under a gray sky. One of them stood slightly apart. Daniel swallowed. "Thank you." Outside, the rain fell harder. Sarah closed the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. She wasn't sure what she'd just allowed into her life, but she knew one thing. Some doors, once opened, didn't close quietly. Daniel Crow did not come back the next day. That, oddly enough, unsettled Sarah more than if he had. She told herself she hadn't expected him to, that whatever fragile understanding they had reached in her kitchen was temporary, conditional, easily dissolved by daylight and second thoughts. Still, when Friday passed without a knock at the door, she felt a quiet tightening in her chest she refused to name. Saturday morning arrived gray and slow. The rain had softened into a mist that clung to everything. blurring the edges of buildings and muting sound. Sarah stood at the sink, washing dishes from breakfast, while the boys built a city out of blocks on the living room rug. The apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls pressing in with their familiar closeness. At noon, a knock came, not loud, not hesitant, just firm enough to be deliberate. Sarah dried her hands slowly, every instinct alert. When she opened the door, Daniel stood there, rain dampening the shoulders of his coat, his hair slightly disordered by the wind. He looked different today, less guarded, more uncertain. "I thought I'd bring lunch," he said, holding up a paper bag from a nearby deli. "If that's all right." Sarah hesitated, then stepped aside. "As long as it's not a habit." Daniel's mouth twitched. "Understood." The boys greeted him with immediate enthusiasm. Eli launched into a detailed explanation of their block city, complete with imaginary zoning laws. Noah listened more than he spoke, watching Daniel's reactions closely. They ate at the small kitchen table, elbows nearly touching. Sandwiches, soup, nothing elaborate. Yet the room felt altered, as though something invisible had shifted its weight. Daniel asked the boys about school, about their favorite books, about what made them laugh. He listened without rushing, nodding, asking follow-up questions. When Eli spilled soup, Daniel handed him a napkin without comment. When Noah spoke quietly, Daniel leaned in to hear. Sarah watched from across the table, arms folded loosely now, her suspicion dulled, but not gone. She noticed how Daniel didn't correct the boys, didn't try to teach them lessons. He simply received them as they were. After lunch, the boys retreated to their room. The apartment fell into a softer quiet. "You didn't have to bring food," Sarah said, stacking plates. "I wanted to," Daniel replied. "No agenda." She glanced at him. "You say that a lot." "It's new for me." She didn't smile, but she didn't argue either. They moved into the living room. Daniel sat on the edge of the couch, posture careful, hands clasped together. Sarah took the armchair opposite him. "This is the part where I ask why you keep coming back," she said. Daniel nodded. "Fair." He took a breath. "Because when I leave here, I feel the weight again." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What weight?" "The silence," he said simply. "The kind that fills rooms and doesn't leave." She understood that too well. "I go back to my house," Daniel continued. "It's large, quiet. Everything works. Nothing is alive." Sarah leaned back. "You could sell it." Daniel smiled faintly. "That wouldn't fix it." She studied him. "You don't seem like a man who struggles with emptiness." "That's because I hide it well." The conversation stalled there, heavy but honest. Dinner happened unexpectedly. The boys emerged again around 6, hungry and loud. Sarah glanced at the clock, then at Daniel. "You should probably head out," she said. "It's getting late." Daniel stood. "Of course." Eli frowned. "You're leaving already?" Daniel crouched. "I don't live here." "That's dumb," Eli said matter-of-factly. Daniel laughed softly. "Sometimes I agree." As Daniel moved toward the door, Sarah heard herself speak before she could stop it. "Stay," she said, "for dinner." The word hung in the air between them. Daniel turned slowly. "Are you sure?" Sarah exhaled. "It's just pasta." "It's never just pasta," Daniel said gently. But he stayed. Sarah cooked with the efficiency of habit, her movements automatic. Daniel offered to help, then accepted her refusal with good grace. The boys set the table, arguing over who got which fork. They ate together, the 4 of them, under the flickering kitchen light. The rain tapped softly against the window, rhythmic, almost comforting. Conversation flowed more easily this time. Eli told a story that made no sense but ended in laughter. Noah asked Daniel why adults sometimes stop talking to each other. Daniel paused. "Because sometimes adults are afraid of saying the wrong thing." "And kids aren't?" Noah asked. Daniel smiled sadly. "Kids are braver." Sarah watched the exchange, heart tightening. After dinner, as the boys brushed their teeth, Daniel stood by the window, looking out at the wet street below. "I used to think dinners like this didn't matter," he said quietly. "I thought the important things were elsewhere." Sarah joined him. "And now I know they're the only things that ever did." The boys returned, pajama-clad and yawning. Daniel said his goodbyes, promising nothing. At the door, Noah handed him another drawing. This one showed a table with 4 figures around it. "For your house," Noah said, "so it won't be empty." Daniel swallowed. "Thank you." When the door closed behind him, the apartment felt different, warmer, louder, even in silence. Sarah tucked the boys into bed later, answering questions, brushing hair back from their foreheads. "Is Daniel our friend?" Eli asked. "Yes," Sarah said. "He is." After the lights were out, Sarah stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the sink, the remnants of dinner still there. She felt the shift now, the way the room remembered laughter, the way presence lingered, and she was afraid, not of Daniel, but of how easily he had changed the room. By Monday, the apartment hallway seemed to know. Sarah felt it the moment she stepped out the door with the boys for school, the way Mrs. Hargreaves' eyes lingered a second too long, the way someone down the hall paused mid-conversation when Daniel's name floated, half-whispered, through the air. Seattle might have been a city of millions, but buildings like this one ran on rumor the way old radiators ran on steam. She tightened the boys' scarves and kept her face neutral. At school drop-off, Eli waved at everything that moved. Noah stood close, quiet, as if absorbing the morning's unspoken tension. "Mom," Noah said once they were back outside, "people are looking at us." "They always do," Sarah replied. "That's not our problem." But it was, a little. Daniel didn't come that day, or the next, and Sarah told herself that was good, necessary. Boundaries were easier to maintain when no one tested them. On Wednesday evening, a knock came, softer than before. She opened the door to find Daniel standing there without a coat, rain darkening his hair. He looked uncomfortable, like someone arriving at the wrong time. "I won't stay long," he said. "I just wanted to check in." Sarah hesitated, then stepped aside. 5 minutes. He nodded. 5. Inside, the boys greeted him as if he'd been gone for months. Eli launched himself forward with a grin. Noah smiled but stayed back, watching Sarah's reaction before committing. Daniel sat on the couch this time, hands folded, posture careful. He didn't look around like a guest. He didn't act like he belonged. It struck Sarah as intentional. "I spoke to my accountant today," he said abruptly. Her shoulders stiffened. "No." Daniel raised his hand slightly. "I'm not offering anything." She waited. "I realized," he continued, choosing his words, "that I don't know how to be helpful without trying to fix things. That's a habit. I'm trying to break it." Sarah studied him. "Why?" "Because you asked me to," he said simply. The boys listened from the floor, pretending not to. Sarah leaned against the counter. "Then listen to this," she said. "We don't need fixing. We need consistency. We need you to either be here as a person or not at all." Daniel nodded slowly. "I can do that." "Can you?" she pressed. "Because showing up feels good until it doesn't. Until people start assuming things. Until my kids start relying on you." Noah looked up sharply at that. Daniel noticed. His jaw tightened. "I won't disappear," he said. "Not if I'm allowed to stay." The honesty in his voice unsettled her. Promises scared her more than absence. They talked for a few minutes more, about nothing important. Daniel left when his 5 minutes were up, no protest. That night, after the boys were asleep, Sarah sat at the kitchen table staring at the faint ring left by Daniel's coffee mug days ago. She scrubbed it away, harder than necessary. The following Saturday, Daniel returned with groceries. Sarah opened the door, saw the bags, and felt anger rise hot and fast. "I said no surprises." Daniel didn't argue. He set the bags down on the floor outside the door. "They're for you to decide," he said. "I'll take them back if you want." The boys hovered behind her, eyes bright. "What's in them?" Eli asked. "Nothing you need," Sarah snapped, then softened. "Sorry." She took a breath. Pride and practicality wrestled in her chest. The refrigerator was thin. Payday was still days away. She picked up one bag, peered inside. Milk, bread, apples, pasta, normal things. No luxury, no labels. "All right," she said, "but this is the last time." Daniel nodded. "Understood." They cooked together this time, not side by side, parallel, careful. Daniel chopped vegetables too slowly. Sarah corrected him once, then let it go. The boys set the table again, laughter bouncing off the walls. Midway through dinner, a knock came. Sarah froze. She opened the door to find Mrs. Hargreave, arms crossed, lips pursed. "I just wanted to make sure everything was all right," the woman said, eyes flicking past Sarah into the apartment. "It is," Sarah replied. Mrs. Hargreave smiled thinly. "It's just, people talk." Sarah's voice stayed even. "Then people should mind their own kitchens." The door closed. Silence rushed back in. Daniel looked at Sarah. "I can leave." "No," she said. "You didn't do anything wrong," but the words felt hollow. Later, as Daniel washed dishes, carefully, as if afraid to break something, Sarah watched him and felt the question form fully for the first time. When did help stop being kindness and start being power? She dried her hands and spoke quietly. "You need to understand something." Daniel turned. "If this ever costs my kids their sense of safety," she said, "it ends." Daniel nodded, serious. "Then we agree." When he left that night, the apartment felt heavier, not emptier, heavier. Sarah lay awake long after midnight, listening to the rain and the breathing of her children through the thin wall. She wondered how long before attachment became expectation, before gratitude turned into debt. And she wondered whether it was possible to accept help without losing yourself. Outside, Seattle kept moving. By Monday, the apartment hallway seemed to know. Sarah felt it the moment she stepped out the door with the boys for school, the way Mrs. Hargreaves' eyes lingered a second too long. The way someone down the hall paused mid-conversation when Daniel's name floated, half-whispered, through the air. Seattle might have been a city of millions, but buildings like this one ran on rumor the way old radiators ran on steam. She tightened the boys' scarves and kept her face neutral. At school drop-off, Eli waved at everything that moved. Noah stood close, quiet, as if absorbing the morning's unspoken tension. "Mom," Noah said once they were back outside, "people are looking at us." "They always do," Sarah replied. "That's not our problem." But it was, a little. Daniel didn't come that day, or the next, and Sarah told herself that was good, necessary. Boundaries were easier to maintain when no one tested them. On Wednesday evening, a knock came, softer than before. She opened the door to find Daniel standing there without a coat, rain darkening his hair. He looked uncomfortable, like someone arriving at the wrong time. "I won't stay long," he said. "I just wanted to check in." Sarah hesitated, then stepped aside. 5 minutes. He nodded. 5. Inside, the boys greeted him as if he had been gone for months. Eli launched himself forward with a grin. Noah smiled but stayed back, watching Sarah's reaction before committing. Daniel sat on the couch this time, hands folded, posture careful. He didn't look around like a guest. He didn't act like he belonged. It struck Sarah as intentional. "I spoke to my accountant today," he said abruptly. Her shoulders stiffened. "No." Daniel raised his hand slightly. "I'm not offering anything." She waited. "I realized," he continued, choosing his words, "that I don't know how to be helpful without trying to fix things. That's a habit. I'm trying to break it." Sarah studied him. "Why?" "Because you asked me to," he said simply. The boys listened from the floor, pretending not to. Sarah leaned against the counter. "Then listen to this," she said. "We don't need fixing. We need consistency. We need you to either be here as a person or not at all." Daniel nodded slowly. "I can do that. Can you?" she pressed. "Because showing up feels good until it doesn't, until people start assuming things, until my kids start relying on you." Noah looked up sharply at that. Daniel noticed. His jaw tightened. "I won't disappear," he said. "Not if I'm allowed to stay." The honesty in his voice unsettled her. Promises scared her more than absence. They talked for a few minutes more, about nothing important. Daniel left when his 5 minutes were up, no protest. That night, after the boys were asleep, Sarah sat at the kitchen table staring at the faint ring left by Daniel's coffee mug days ago. She scrubbed it away, harder than necessary. The following Saturday, Daniel returned with groceries. Sarah opened the door, saw the bags, and felt anger rise hot and fast. "I said no surprises." Daniel didn't argue. He set the bags down on the floor outside the door. "They're for you to decide," he said. "I'll take them back if you want." The boys hovered behind her, eyes bright. "What's in them?" Eli asked. "Nothing you need," Sarah snapped, then softened. "Sorry." She took a breath. Pride and practicality wrestled in her chest. The refrigerator was thin. Payday was still days away. She picked up one bag, peered inside. Milk, bread, apples, pasta, normal things, no luxury, no labels. "All right," she said, "but this is the last time." Daniel nodded. Understood. They cooked together this time, not side by side, parallel, careful. Daniel chopped vegetables too slowly. Sarah corrected him once, then let it go. The boys set the table again, laughter bouncing off the walls. Midway through dinner, a knock came. Sarah froze. She opened the door to find Mrs. Hargreave, arms crossed, lips pursed. I just wanted to make sure everything was all right, the woman said, eyes flicking past Sarah into the apartment. It is, Sarah replied. Mrs. Hargreaves smiled thinly. It's just, people talk. Sarah's voice stayed even. Then people should mind their own kitchens. The door closed. Silence rushed back in. Daniel looked at Sarah. I can leave. No, she said. You didn't do anything wrong, but the words felt hollow. Later, as Daniel washed dishes, carefully, as if afraid to break something, Sarah watched him and felt the question form fully for the first time. When did help stop being kindness and start being power? She dried her hands and spoke quietly. You need to understand something. Daniel turned. If this ever costs my kids their sense of safety, she said, it ends. Daniel nodded, serious. Then we agree. When he left that night, the apartment felt heavier, not emptier, heavier. Sarah lay awake long after midnight, listening to the rain and the breathing of her children through the thin wall. She wondered how long before attachment became expectation, before gratitude turned into debt. And she wondered whether it was possible to accept help without losing yourself. Outside, Seattle kept moving. Daniel Crow did not go home after parking near Sarah's building. He sat in his car with the engine off, rain drumming steadily against the roof, watching the single light glowing in one of the second-floor windows. He didn't know whose light it was. He didn't know if Sarah was awake, or if the boys were already asleep, tangled in blankets and dreams. He only knew that the sight of that window steadied him in a way his own house never had. He didn't go up, not yet. Some things needed silence before words. The next morning came too quickly. Daniel returned to his apartment, too large, too quiet, and showered, dressed, and stared at his reflection longer than usual. The man looking back at him seemed unfamiliar. Tired, yes. Older, certainly. But there was something else there now. Resolve, perhaps. Or fear sharpened into purpose. He drove to Sarah's place that afternoon. This time, he carried nothing. Sarah opened the door and immediately saw it on his face, that something had shifted. His shoulders were heavier, his eyes more focused, as if he had crossed a line he could not uncross. You went, she said. Daniel nodded. I did. She stepped aside without another word. Inside, the boys sat at the table doing homework. Eli looked up first. You're back. Noah didn't smile immediately. He studied Daniel's face, then asked, Did it go bad? Daniel crouched slightly. It didn't go easy, he said honestly, but it didn't go bad. Noah seemed to accept that. Sarah poured coffee, her hands steady but her posture alert. Tell me. Daniel spoke slowly. He told her about the drive, the rain, the door opening before he knocked. He told her Lucy hadn't hugged him, hadn't forgiven him, hadn't softened in any obvious way. He told her about the sketchbook and the coffee and the way Lucy's voice stayed guarded, sharp with old pain. She didn't send me away, he finished, but she didn't invite me back either. Sarah nodded. That's not nothing. No, Daniel agreed. It's not. They sat in silence for a moment, the boys listening from the edge of the room. Then Eli spoke, as if voicing the obvious. So, you're not done yet? Daniel smiled faintly. No, I'm not. That afternoon passed quietly. Daniel stayed longer than usual, helping Noah with math, letting Eli explain a complicated game with constantly changing rules. Sarah moved around them, watching, noticing how naturally the boys leaned toward him now, how easily they assumed he would be there, and that frightened her. After dinner, when the boys retreated to their room, Sarah turned to Daniel. This is where it gets hard, she said. Daniel nodded. I know. You went to Lucy, she continued. You opened that door. That matters. But what happens here also matters. I understand. Do you? She pressed. Because my children are starting to trust you. Daniel held her gaze. But that's not comforting, Sarah said quietly. He didn't argue. She crossed her arms, leaning against the counter. Forgiveness isn't free, she said. It costs time, consistency. It costs staying when it would be easier to leave. Daniel's voice was steady. I'm prepared to pay that. Sarah shook her head slightly. You don't get to decide the price. I know, he said. They do. She studied him for a long moment, then spoke the question she had been holding back. What if Lucy asks you to choose? Daniel didn't respond immediately. His jaw tightened, his breath slowed. If she says you can only be in her life if you step away from us, Sarah continued. What will you do? The question hung between them, heavy and unavoidable. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. I won't abandon anyone again, he said finally. Not her, not your boys, not you. That's not an answer, Sarah said. It's the only honest one I have. She turned away, staring at the sink. That's what scares me. Daniel stood. I won't put you in that position, he said. If Lucy needs space, I'll give it. But I won't disappear. Not from her, not from here. Sarah exhaled slowly. She wanted certainty. She wanted guarantees. Life had taught her how useless those were. Later that night, after Daniel left, Sarah lay awake listening to the rain and the soft breathing of her sons. Noah stirred in his sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. She rose quietly and checked on them, pulling the blanket higher around Eli's shoulders. In the living room, she noticed something she hadn't before. On the bookshelf, between old paperbacks and school folders, Noah had placed the drawing he'd given Daniel days ago, the 4 figures under the gray sky. He'd redrawn it, carefully. This time, the figures stood closer together. Sarah's throat tightened. The next evening, Daniel returned again. And the next. Sometimes only for 20 minutes, sometimes for an hour. He never brought food, never stayed late, never crossed the boundaries Sarah set. He showed up. And then, on Friday afternoon, Daniel's phone rang while he was at Sarah's table. He glanced at the screen and went still. Lucy, he said quietly. Sarah froze. Daniel answered, standing, stepping toward the window. Yes, he said, I can talk. The boys watched him, sensing the shift. Sarah couldn't hear Lucy's words, only Daniel's responses. I understand. Yes. No, I won't rush you. I'll come if you want me to. He ended the call and stood there for a long moment, phone still in his hand. She wants to see me again, he said finally. Sarah searched his face. And? She doesn't want anyone else involved, he added. Not yet. The unspoken words filled the room. Sarah nodded slowly. Then you should go. Daniel looked at her, something raw in his eyes. I don't want to disappear. You're not, she said firmly. You're choosing. He swallowed. I'll be back. I know, she replied, and surprised herself by believing it. As Daniel left that evening, the rain began again, heavier than before. Sarah stood at the window watching his car pull away, her chest tight with conflicting emotions. Fear, hope, resolve. Forgiveness, she realized, wasn't about erasing the past. It was about living with its consequences. And every person in this fragile, unfinished family was paying a different price. Seattle did not change for anyone. The rain still came when it pleased. The sky still lingered low and gray, and the streets still filled each morning with people moving quickly toward places that mattered to them. But inside a small second-floor apartment near Aurora Avenue, something had shifted, softly, permanently. It began not with a grand announcement, but with a Tuesday morning. Sarah stood in the kitchen, coffee cooling in her mug, while Noah tied his shoes with exaggerated care, and Eli hopped on one foot, narrating an imaginary race against time. The routine was familiar, comforting. Yet, there was a lightness in the room now, an absence of the tension that once clung to every quiet moment. Daniel had been gone for 4 days, not vanished, not silent, just elsewhere. Sarah had watched him leave with a steadiness that surprised her. She had learned, finally, the difference between abandonment and choice. Daniel hadn't disappeared. He had said where he was going, why he was going, and when he would return. That alone made all the difference. The boys felt it too. He said he'd be back Friday, Eli had announced confidently on Monday night, as if reciting a fact rather than expressing hope. Noah had nodded. And he always does what he says now. Sarah hadn't corrected them. Friday arrived quietly. The rain had eased into a fine mist by late afternoon when a knock sounded at the door, familiar now, steady, unhurried. Sarah opened it to find Daniel standing there, a little thinner than before, his eyes tired but clear. He carried no bags, no gifts, only himself. Hi, he said. She stepped aside. Come in. The boys didn't rush him this time. They stood, watching his face. Did it go okay? Noah asked. Daniel knelt so they were eye level. It went, honestly, he said. That's the best kind of okay. Eli grinned. That's my favorite kind. They laughed, and the sound settled into the apartment like it belonged there. Dinner that night was simple: rice, vegetables, chicken. The boys talked. Daniel listened. Sarah noticed how naturally the rhythm returned, as if no time had been lost. After the dishes were done and the boys retreated to their room, Daniel and Sarah sat across from each other at the kitchen table. "She let me back in," Daniel said quietly. Sarah didn't interrupt. "Not completely," he added. "Not easily. But she's willing to try." Sarah nodded. "That's a beginning." Daniel looked at his hands. "She asked me not to disappear again." Sarah met his gaze. And I told her I wouldn't," he said. "That even when things are complicated, I'd stay." Silence stretched between them, comfortable and heavy all at once. "There's something else," Daniel said. "Something I need to ask you." Sarah stiffened slightly. "Go on." "I want to help," he said carefully. "Not with money handed over a table, not favors. Something real." She waited. "I have a design department in my company," Daniel continued. "Textiles, small runs, creative work. I've seen what you do, your precision, your patience. I want to offer you a position." Sarah stared at him. "This isn't charity," he said quickly. "It's work, paid, stable, with hours that make sense for you and the boys." The room felt very still. "I didn't ask for this," Sarah said. "I know," Daniel replied. "That's why I'm offering." She looked away, breathing slowly. This was the moment she had feared, the line where help could turn into dependence. "If I say no," she said, "will anything change?" Daniel shook his head. "No." "If I say yes," she continued, "it won't be because I owe you." "I wouldn't accept it otherwise," he said. Sarah closed her eyes briefly, then she opened them. "Yes," she said, "I'll accept." Daniel exhaled, a sound that carried relief, gratitude, and something close to joy. Life did not transform overnight, but it did, unmistakably, improve. Sarah's days gained structure. Her work gained recognition. The refrigerator filled more easily. Bills stopped looming like threats. More importantly, Sarah felt seen, not rescued, not pitied, but respected. The boys noticed the change too. "Mom smiles more," Eli announced one evening. Noah nodded. "And she sleeps better." Daniel's visits continued, not constant, not consuming, but consistent. And then, one Saturday morning, he didn't arrive alone. Sarah opened the door to find a young woman standing beside him. Tall, reserved, her expression guarded but curious. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her eyes sharp and observant. "Sarah," Daniel said, voice careful, "this is Lucy." Sarah smiled warmly. "I'm glad you're here." Lucy hesitated, then nodded. "Hi." From the hallway came two small gasps. "You're real?" Eli said in awe. Lucy blinked, then laughed softly. "I think so." Noah stepped forward. "I'm Noah. This is Eli." Lucy knelt slightly. "It's nice to meet you." The tension dissolved not all at once, but enough. They spent the afternoon together, drawing, talking, laughing awkwardly at first, then more freely. Lucy watched her father closely, noticing the way he listened now, the way he stayed present even when he didn't know what to say. Later, as the sun dipped behind the clouds, Lucy stood by the window with Sarah. "He's different," Lucy said quietly. Sarah nodded. "He worked hard to be." Lucy swallowed. "Thank you for not giving up on him." Sarah met her eyes. "He didn't do it alone." That evening, after everyone left, Sarah stood in the doorway watching the rain fall once more. Seattle hadn't changed, but she had. And so had Daniel, and Lucy, and the boys. No one had been saved. They had chosen each other. And that, Sarah realized, was the quietest and strongest kind of miracle. Some miracles do not arrive with thunder or blazing light. They do not split the sky or stop time. They arrive quietly. In a man who chooses not to run anymore. In a woman who keeps her heart open, even when it has been hurt. In children who believe in presence more than promises. The Bible tells us, "The Lord does not always calm the storm, but he calms the heart within the storm." God did not erase Daniel's past. He did not instantly make Sarah's life easy. He did not force Lucy to forgive. Instead, God did something deeper. He placed them on the same path. He gave them the freedom to choose differently, one day at a time. That is the real miracle. A miracle is not wealth. It is not a big house or a perfect life or pain disappearing overnight. A miracle is choosing love instead of escape, choosing presence instead of silence, choosing forgiveness, even when the wound still aches. If you are watching this today and you feel tired, or feel that you have gone too far to turn back, or believe you no longer deserve a new beginning, please remember this: God has never taken his eyes off you. No road is too long for him to guide you home. As long as you are willing to stay, miracles still have room to happen. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who may need hope today. Leave a comment and tell us about a quiet miracle in your own life. And subscribe to the channel so we can continue sharing stories that heal, inspire, and remind us we are not alone. May God bless you, bless your family, leave your soul, and place peace in your heart. Not the fragile peace of the world, but the deep, steady peace that only comes from faith and love. Amen.